Test. Spin it again.
It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena.
You know what, I've heard people call, and I kind of like the era that we're in, the post-truth kind of era.
And lately there's been a lot of coverage in the real news about the growing and booming business of creating fake news.
Well, I don't know, maybe he was watching CNN fake news. What do you think?
You are fake news.
Sir,
go ahead.
Let us return to the fight. This battle is far from over.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. John, let me know if I'm peeking at my mic here. How's everybody doing today? Another edition of Real News. These new mic qualities, Sean, I'm telling you, man. I'm blaring in my headphones here. I'm hearing myself like I never have before. Brand new production quality. How you doing this morning, buddy? That's what I'm talking about. We already got people. Yeah, I saw that hat, man. That's a groovy looking hat you're working with there, buddy. Is that right? Right? There you go. Morning, buddy. How's it going, man? That's what I'm talking about, man. Hey, look, We talk about building community all the time on this program. Okay, that's what we're doing now. This is the community that we're building behind me. Can you see the entire world? That's what we're doing. We're building this community out as large as we possibly can. That's the reason why I chose this background. It's not because Sean said it was awesome last night. We needed to try it. Yeah. Oh yeah. How about that? Yeah. Good to go. Yeah, we'll try it out. I might try and get closer to this mic. We'll see what happens. We're experimenting with some stuff this morning, man. Hey, greatest audience in the nation appreciation segment right now. Let me know how you're doing. Let me know what you're struggling with. Let me know what your prayer requests are, your concerns, anything you need help with, any businesses you see that are innovating out in the area, anything like that, Shine at all. If we have any stories, we'll bring them your way. Just in general, how you doing? A good little check-in for everybody this morning. We already have Kelly, Stephanie, Victoria, Sherry, a bunch of folks. Michaela's in there. Let's see. They say Michaela just said you can't hear Shine still. All you hear is Mr. Henry. Is that setting still on?
Yeah, it's fixed now. I'm sorry.
All right, we got it. Let's see. Kelly already says on Facebook here, I see Representative Zachary is pushing for us to be going back to work. I'm super proud of him for standing up for him. I mean, I'll tell you what. Okay, so we just did the greatest audience in the nation appreciation segment here. Again, if you don't feel comfortable letting us know in the comment section, direct message either myself or Shine. Let us know, direct messages in Real News. Again, what you need help with, what you're thankful for, any stuff like that. But Kelly's comments goes directly into, I think, the story that I was going to open up the program with is getting people back into the economy, right? Kelly just said a second ago, I see Representative Zachary is pushing for us to get back to work. I'm super proud of him and super proud of standing up for us, standing up for him as well. The headline I was going to lead off with this morning is essentially just that. It's coming from the Washington Post here. I'll pull this up so we can all see at the same time, but the live updates that are giving it's a little bit idea here is Trump's push to reopen the economy next month spurs worries over resurgence of coronavirus cases. And obviously, this is coming from health professionals, as you see here in just a second as I'm going through this. We've heard these ideas already about, okay, so Sean, what do we do then with this whole idea of reintroduction into American society? You've seen this happen now in several places around the world. They've seemingly rooted this out, and now it's being reintroduced either by way of travel or someone else has the virus that's still going around or something. And we don't have a vaccine ready yet, and we're not anywhere near herd immunity. So what does that look like, right? And is there potential for something far, far worse? Here's the headline right now. Trump's push to reopen the economy spurs worries over resurgence of coronavirus cases. Global death toll nears 100,000. They say, again, Washington Post article that you're looking at right now. But this is obviously coming from, widespread unemployment. In Tennessee alone, I have the story linked to the show notes right below the section here. In Tennessee alone, we're looking at about a 25% increase from what we've ever seen previously. Here we go, 25 times higher. Sorry, goodness gracious, let me get that right. 25 times higher than normal in Tennessee is what we're seeing that we've ever seen before. And these volatile markets, Trump administration is pushing to reopen the U.S. economy as early as May 1st. As early as May 1st. What's this date today, Shan? Let me check. April 10th, bro, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's still, I mean, that only seems closer because we were thinking it could have been really far away. But that's still quite a bit away. And I mean, we're at what, 6.6 or something jobless claims right now. Imagining what that'll be like as we get around to the beginning of next month. And I also think part of the reason we're hearing that right now, Mr. Henry, is that a lot of people think that the economy needs to be turned on before the 1st of next month because of the domino effect of people not paying rent and everything that causes. You end up getting people laid off and fired all the way to, plumbers and handymen and stuff like that who don't get paid or have to stop a job because the rental company isn't getting their money and stuff like that. But I don't know. I think that's why you're hearing that. I don't know if I don't know if it's necessarily a conversation about coronavirus safety. It may be a conversation about joblessness safety. That may be what more this May 1st deal is, and an acknowledgement. It's like, well, yeah, it's not going to be perfectly safe, but we've expanded hospital capacity to an absurd amount, and we've expanded our PPE and our respirator capacity and our ventilator capacity. Theoretically, we should be able to handle the worst of this, and we should be able to move supplies from this state to that state, depending on where hot spots are. Everybody's gone through the first phase of like everybody knows what it means when they say social distancing, so we can say, hey, you got a level 1 over here or a level 3 over there. I think that's what they're figuring out is ways we can get it working. Because I don't think they think the economy can last with it shut down past the first. I think that's part of it.
Well, this actually brings up a portion of the story that you're seeing right now, that Real News listener sent me. I want to say 2 or 3 days ago now at this point. But
I had my dream career and loads of student debt. So I went to credible.com and in 3 minutes
this is that South Park episode,
actual rates from
this is that entire last season of South Park. I cannot find the ad to shut it down. There it goes. Anyways, the headline is you're seeing right now, coronavirus beyond flattening the curve. Here's how to end the pandemic. This goes down here again. Fox News headline. I've highlighted this section for you right now, as you can hopefully see on the screen. The only thing we know now that can reduce infections immediately is widespread testing, exhaustive contact tracing, and mandatory quarantining of all those known to be exposed regardless of the test results. Regardless of the test results, buddy. And this is what I'm saying, man. Like, I think this is a little bit where people are, is how do we reintroduce people back into sort of this economic situation? How do we look after the economy? And at the same time, how do we go off the experts? That was the Fox News headline. A Fox News headline, a Fox News expert that was basically saying, look, we have to do a similar version of what South Korea has done already. I suppose I'd be really interested to see what the Real News takes on that whole thing is. How do we get back to work here and at the same time not risk a reintroduction? Because again, as I'm saying, unless we get some sense, I'm not a medical expert. I have very little ideas what I'm talking here. I just know what I've been told is unless there's some version of a vaccine, or unless there's some version of a herd immunity situation going on here, we're going to continually have a problem with this, at least for the next couple of seasons coming through. Now, maybe not to this extent as we are right now, obviously. And here lies another problem too, Sean, is that the whole vaccine situation is going to bring up an entirely different issue as well. Because again, that whole conversation, the vaccine conversation is still simmering on the surface for a lot of people around this country. And it had just sort of cut off right before this whole thing was introduced. And now we have like the mega players in the world, in this sphere, this conversation, like the Bill Gates almost, if you will, talking about this is the way we need to go. Now, health experts obviously are saying that ending that shutdown prematurely would be disastrous because restrictions have barely had time to work in the United States, which leads the world in confirmed infections of this coronavirus. Now, meanwhile, as the number of global deaths related to the virus approaches 100,000, authorities around the world are warning people to stay home during this Easter weekend. Good Friday today, which it is. Good Friday, everybody.
Happy Good Friday.
And Easter Mondays are public holidays in numerous nations that are being ravaged by the virus. Now, here are some significant developments so far. I'll go through these, Sean, and then I really want to get to another question of not only how do we reintroduce a better economic situation, but dude, what does the November election, what do these November elections look like? What is a voting in this new representative Republican, this new normal even look like? Here's a few updates before we get to that though, right?
Well, let me just say, Donald Trump was asked about, and I think it was Saturday, whatever the last presidential coronavirus update briefing that we carried. I think it was last Saturday. Donald Trump was asked about voting by mail, and a journalist basically said, shouldn't all states be prepared to vote by mail by November? And Donald Trump said, no, I don't like voting by mail. People need to go and put that beautiful piece of paper in that big, beautiful box so it can be counted, Right. And he said, I feel like people can cheat. He's like, I feel it's really easy to cheat. He's like, we don't know where the letters are coming from. They could be printing the letters off in a factory somewhere and putting he said all this stuff. So at least from the executive branch, who has the authority during a national emergency to mandate such a thing without Congress passing laws or without state legislatures changing laws, that guy's not into voting by mail.
No. Oh, no, clearly not.
So, it's very interesting. Aren't you glad with that? I'm not trying to get political here. It's more like a policy thing. I'm so glad Hillary Clinton didn't win the presidency of the United States. We'd probably have an app for voting, and then everybody would be questioning the result in November if we had Hillary Clinton. That would be super weird. And maybe she would have done better on other stuff. I'm just saying on this particular issue, I'm really glad that she was not. I'm glad there's a bias against either voting on the phone or voting by mail or whatever. There's a bias towards voting in person.
No, and I totally understand you there too, but it's also interesting because this article, again, from AP that I'm about to pull up on a national scale, I suppose AP is not the most biased version of reporting that you can go to, but it obviously every version of reporting out there would think has some slight version of bias in it, right? Even outside of opinion or anything else. So I guess what I'm saying is these issues that I'm about to go through in a second, or linking out the COVID-19 numbers, what's going on with Boris Johnson, like this global scale of what's happening is actually causing a bit of Republican states to not necessarily disagree with Trump, but also say like, hey, we need to vote somehow. We need to figure out how to vote somehow, and it's drawing this interesting sort of line between Republican-controlled states and the president, president himself, to say, well, should we rely upon voting by mail or not? Should everything be done by voting by mail? Wisconsin is a perfect example of exactly what we're talking about here. We'll get to that in just a second. But officially, anyways, COVID-19 disease caused by coronavirus has killed more than 95,000 people. Experts believe the numbers attributed to the virus, and again, this is coming from Washington Post sort of updates here. Experts believe that numbers attributed to the virus are deceptively low. And I paused there, buddy, because I can't get a good handle on whether or not the accuracy of that reporting about the numbers being deceptively low. They go on to say that Centers for Disease Control and Prevention,
a lot of people are being touched by this virus, and depending on how you count, are you counting by, using statistical analysis and saying, based on what we know, this is how many people we think have it? Or do you count just by people that are confirmed virus carriers?
Right.
Do you count just by people who go to the hospital? Is that the count? Because aren't the people who just stay at home and don't really experience enough symptoms to go to the hospital, aren't they almost irrelevant to count?
Well, and that's what's so difficult about getting some of these numbers, buddy, is because I feel like for every story I'm seeing, it finishes up by saying the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, for example, counts only deaths in which the virus is confirmed in a laboratory test, and it's called the U.S. count an underestimation. But I feel like for every story I'm seeing about that, I'm also seeing stories about like, well, no, they're basically just counting any death at all that's related in any, even a tacit relation to anything dealing with coronavirus. I even saw, I want to say it was a New York Times. I'll pull this article in a second, though. Some article asking where have the strokes and the heart attack patients gone, because apparently they're just not showing up or they're not being counted anymore. Dude, it's just, I guess all I'm simply saying here though is it's supremely difficult to get a handle on legitimate factual information that there's like a consensus agreement upon, especially when it pertains to some of these numbers stuff, man.
Well, yeah, and I think it's going to be that way because it's a matter of national security. Like the people not rioting and every other country thinking that we have it under control is part of national security right now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And we're not going to know. It's going to be a controlled number. I mean, now, if we're 10 years from now and you're like, it's really weird that I don't know the numbers, that'd be a scandal, kind of. But during the middle of it, I'm not surprised. And mostly because it would take a super large institution to give you any kind of numbers, because we're talking about, many counties, lots of hospitals, lots of people. I mean, what's the number right now? It's over 10,000 people who have died. That's not as many as we thought it would be, even at this point. But that's still a lot of people from a lot of different places. I mean, right. You would need an institution very large just to do the counting. So I'd say a lot of the counting that you're seeing right now is estimation work, because if you're looking for hard numbers, those are going to seem deceptively low because you're talking about confirmed cases that go to hospitals compared to population. And then, the information that it's probably touched a lot more people than that is well known. So that's why what I meant when I said what I said before, Mr. Henry, is there's many ways some people who have a bias towards the president or really intense fear about this virus could make a great argument and say they're being deceptively low, but it's because the accurate numbers are impossible to get right now.
Well, sure, dude, and this is what I'm saying. I think the confusion, I think if there's any consensus, it's the consensus in the fact that there is no consensus, right? I think if there's any consensus, it's the idea that like people are just generally and genuinely confused, because there's 3 comments in a row that are all saying the same thing. It's like, hold on. This so the Washington Post is reporting that they're deceptively low, but I've also been hearing that they're deceptively high, right? So Kelly says in Facebook, that's not what Dr. B said at the press conference. This is coming from Facebook comments. That's not what Dr. Dr. B said at the press conference, they're counting all deaths in all caps, all deaths associated with as COVID-19 deaths. John just said in Facebook, or deceptively high, they're counting any death without confirming the underlying health issues. And Judy just said all deaths are being counted as virus related. And part of this, dude, goes on to what we were getting back to the voting conversation of exactly what you were saying before, Shane. This is not just the only thing that's being reported here, right? So obviously we see British Prime Minister Boris Johnson. He's just been removed from intensive care unit. And that was a scary situation for our Brits over there across the pond, right? Where he was being treated for coronavirus infection, remains in a London hospital. And then he says Johnson is in extremely good spirits. Now, we also saw New York State had a soaring death toll just a few days ago. And it's still being predicted that while it's not going to be nearly as bad as the modeling data we had previously, the next couple of days are going to be some of the worst, if not the worst, that New York has seen. They've also said that contract workers have been hired to bury victims on Hart Island. And again, going on to say, although Governor Cuomo has said that failing hospitals and intensive care admissions falling hospitalizations and intensive care admissions suggest that the curve may be starting to flatten. All right. Now, another story about Taiwan, but all this goes to the reason why I went through some of those updates there is not to draw this sort of like apocalyptic scenario or how dire things are. No, it's just to paint the picture and to give some more fodder for Shine and I to comment on as to this is the narrative that's being spun, Shine. This is the fuel that's being added to that fire of this is why we need mail-in, right? This is why we need a voting system that's just pure mail-in only, because look at what's happening around the world. Look at the numbers. They're being underreported right now. If we reintroduce it, Trump is already talking about getting into the economy by May 1st. Way too early as far as the health are concerned. And because it's way too early, what if he gets us back in and we start going to vote? You're talking standing back to back within a half inch of another person. I'm exaggerating for sake of effect here, but standing back to back within a half inch of another person for hours upon hours of lines waiting to vote and all touching the same tabs as each other. And I get it, dude. Like if you start thinking that way, if that's your mentality and you just slowly posit the idea that reintroduction of this coronavirus situation is sort of inevitable or bound to happen. Again, one more time, this is not Mr. Henry speaking. I'm telling y'all, this is the narrative that's being spun by whoever, or is it whomever? I don't know, Shine. Whoever wants to push that narrative, that's what's being pushed right now as to the necessity for a mail-in ballot.
Yeah, it started days ago. And it's reaching a fever pitch now, and it'll continue. It'll just keep continuing. But as far as the numbers conversation goes, it'll either be a constant scandal or people will get numb to it.
Yes, right.
So whoever is using it for political gain, you can't just sit there and beat it with a stick because people will get numb to it. So you better use it sparingly and use it to get what you want, because you're not going to be able to just use it over and over and over and over again.
Dude,
already people are not freaking out about 10,000 people dead. 10,000 people dead is a lot. And I know I'm really glad I watched that episode of it took me like 5 years to get into Ben Shapiro. And now I actually kind of like him a little bit. I only listen to him like once a week.
Say it and so, dude.
You know what I'm saying? But he made a great comment when this was all starting. Like, as you hear numbers, it was just when we were starting to get like in the 1 or 2,000 era. He was saying, you don't compare this to Pearl Harbor or 9/11. That's stupid. It's a disease. It's not a war. It's not a terrorist attack. Those are totally different things. It's a disease. But people are and I understand that. But I still think, like if people don't really care about 10,000, what are they going to care about 20,000?
No, right.
30,000, 50,000. Because 10,000 is a lot. 10,000 is a lot of people. 10,000 is most of the people within a couple miles of my house. That's a lot of people. And I don't know if, say in July, you're going to be able to use the people number stick if you've been using it nonstop for 2-3 months to say we want mail-in or we want an app. You may be able to do other stuff, but I just don't think people are going to be into it. I really don't.
Well, because you only get one bite at that apple, Shine. I was actually talking to my wife about this
you only get one bite of the apple. That's
right.
Totally right.
And you can only tell the American populace that the sky is falling on a single occasion, and they'll probably believe you. Now, if that sky doesn't fall, and especially if you said it's going to fall to an extent that no one in my lifetime has ever, my generation, let's say, no one in my generation has ever seen it fall to the extent that they told us it was about to, and possibly still might. Let's be for real, okay?
But if you pitch that once, and if the intention behind that pitch was 250,000, 500,000, 1.5 million, I heard as high as 2.5 million at one point if we had no mitigating factors at all. And that is possibly very true. But the thing is, if you pitch those, I think what China's saying too, and this is a bit of the strategy I've heard also, if you pitch that number super high to get the American populace to pay attention and do something about it, not necessarily saying it's fear mongering, but it's at least tinging towards that. The idea now becomes, well, okay, you're going to frustrate so much in the American populace because you weren't honest with them to begin with, that they may not listen to you the second time around. And Sean, let's be for real, dude. This is a bit of the problem that happened with the Spanish flu. Okay, it was introduced once. People thought they got over it, and then they weren't looking for the second reintroduction of it, and they didn't do anything about it. And then it just it went rampant, buddy. I mean, there's stuff we got to pay attention to. But I'm telling you, man.
What was sad with the Spanish flu, too, is it mostly affected older people the first time, and the second time around, it only affected younger people, which was super weird because it mutated. But anyway, please continue.
Well, getting to the issue of the voter stuff, man, the mail-in process in particular, this is something that, being that our audience largely leans, say, I don't know, little L libertarian to just straight up Republican. All right, let's be honest about that. That's mainly the people that watch the Real News program here, but we're open to consideration of all worldviews here, all political ideologies. I've always said in this program too that the one of the virtues I love to hold above most all else is if you're presented with superior facts, you have a willingness to change your mind. The willingness to grow and progress and change your mind is something that I find most endearing in another human being, because I think if we all tried to do that more, it'd be a much easier place to live. Now, with that being said, anybody else that's open to a different style of conversation about what this mail-in voting thing would look like, let me know. Because here's the story coming from AP. Starts off by saying President Donald Trump is warning without evidence. Dude, help me with this, Shine. I'm trying not to stress these things in
that's got to be from the Washington Post. That's like their tagline on all news.
All right, dude.
Without evidence.
Without evidence. President Trump is warning without evidence. It's the first. I'm with a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I'm 7 words into the first sentence of the first paragraph. President Trump is warning without evidence. What is it? With warning what? You haven't even told me what he's warning of yet to let me know that it's without evidence. Whatever. Okay.
One of the biggest losers in the coronavirus world right now is the media. If people didn't trust them very much before this, the patience for this kind of garbage, where you, like you said, where you're not trained as, you didn't go to college as a journalist, Mr. Henry. I mean, we played radio on for a while and stuff like that, but we never had people in authority say this is what journalism is and this isn't, except for people maybe we worked for. But like you, on its face, you as an almost lay person, me too, as an almost lay person, 7 words in, they haven't told you anything about what they're going to talk about, and they describe it as a claim without evidence. Right. You already know, like, man, you're making a bias claim, and you're giving me the description of the claim before you give me the claim. There's obvious bias in there. What the heck? But who's doing that, by the way, so we can know not to support them?
This is AP, dude. That's why I was so surprised by this, man. It's like,
don't be surprised. They're garbage. They're garbage. Okay. They got infiltrated by the government during the Obama administration. Remember when all their emails got taken?
That's right. That is true. I forgot about that.
Ever since then, they've been garbage. Like, ever since they've thought that they could be blackmailed by the NSA, CIA, or FBI, they've been garbage. Ugh, because that is garbage. And that's not a good example to people growing up and wanting to be journalists when they grow up. So if that's what you want to be, don't do that.
Just so people know I'm not lying. Obviously, here's the AP headline right now that you're looking at. And here's the first sentence. President Donald Trump is warning without evidence. President Donald Trump is warning without evidence. I don't even know what he's warning without evidence, first of all. All I know is that if I'm reading that as what I would think objective, rational, reasonable individual would be reading any documentation.
Since we built it up, what is he warning without
evidence? It's what I'm saying. He's warning without evidence, apparently, that the expanding mail-in voting will increase voter fraud. But see, that's what I'm saying, Sean. It doesn't necessarily matter what they said after that. I just know that if I'm reading any other document aside from that, I know those string of words indicate to me whatever you're going to read after this has no evidence to support it. But apparently he's warning right now that mail-in voting will increase voter fraud. Several GOP state officials are forging ahead to do just that, undermining one of Trump's arguments about how elections should be conducted amid the coronavirus outbreak. Now, while Trump has complained that voting by mail was ripe for fraud, this is a bit of what Shine was talking about just a second ago, where he's been commenting on how ripe for fraud it would be. Republican state officials, so says the AP, in Iowa, Ohio, and West Virginia have all taken steps to ease access to mail-in ballots. Now, I would also say some of these states we're about to mention, go check their primary voting dates that might have a little bit to do with this. Nevertheless, going on, so it's saying that following health official warnings that voting in person can risk transmission of the deadly virus. The Republican governor of Nebraska urged voters to apply for absentee ballots. Florida's GOP chairman says that the party will continue to run a robust vote-in mail program. Now, obviously, this goes on to continue to say that the disconnect between Trump and the Republican state officials illustrates the abrupt hard turn the president and the national political allies have taken on this issue. Okay, going on basically that before the coronavirus actually hit, many in this GOP had warned or started to warm to the process of a mail-in voting process, agreeing that it could be conducted without fraud and even used to their political advantage. Now, that's where I wanted to stop. I have one other comment on the thing that happened in Wisconsin I want to get to, but before I get to that, poll for the Real News audience right now. What do you think about the idea of the possibility of a mail-in voting process being, what does he say, ripe for fraud, right? I will say to this extent, Sean, okay? Love or hate this opinion, Mr. Henry, relying upon the Supreme Court precedent as it is. Anytime there's been an issue that's come up about talking about voter fraud, whether it come from mail-in process or not, most courts have usually said it's difficult to cite direct evidence. I'm sugarcoating this. They basically said there's a severe lack of evidence for voter fraud out there. Now, I'm putting that out there a little bit, Sean, as playing devil's advocate, because I know how some of the Real News audience is going to feel about that claim. I'm just telling you, this is typically what the courts tell me.
Well, hey, but let's bring up a great point. Do I have to wait for someone to rob my house to put a lock on it? Do I need evidence that someone wants to rob my house in order to put a lock on it? I mean, I hate to sound like a red meat person and try to simplify it like that, but isn't that the case, Mr. Henry? That you don't need to wait till someone is breaking into your house, or you know someone has said, you know what, I'm going to break into that house. Or maybe even a picture of someone breaking into my house before someone allows me to buy a lock and install it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Do you have to prove in order to protect your house that someone wants to rob it? No. All you have to do is prove that there's incentive to rob it, right?
I think that's what John is saying on Facebook. He's saying that the evidence is past. This is a comment coming from Facebook, by the way. One quick plug. Always comment on our Facebook feeds or YouTube feeds or anything else we're streaming on live. We love to use these comments to drive the commentary in the show. John's agreeing with you, buddy. He's saying in Facebook, quote, the evidence is past voter fraud. All we have to do is look at what has been done prior to all the relaxed measures are out in place. I think you're right, buddy. I mean, the possibility, the potential for it to happen for a lot of people says, why, if there's a way to do it otherwise, why would we immediately jump to something that could possibly be ripe for fraud? Go ahead.
All you got to do is prove incentive, that there's incentive to do it in order to justify security. And the incentive is if you can rig this game, you control the most powerful government in the history of mankind. You control the most powerful military in the history of mankind. You control the most powerful economy in the history of mankind. You control a machine that can pump out trillions of dollars. That's not theoretical. That's what they're doing right now. You know what I'm saying? So, like, all you have to do is prove that there's incentive to commit fraud in order to justify some kind of protection from it. You don't have to prove that people are trying to fraud you. Then if you knew that, you'd just go arrest those people. You wouldn't make election rules.
Well,
you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know. It's such a weird argument to say we don't need security because you haven't proven the need for you. There's no evidence that people have committed voter fraud. No, but there's definitely evidence that if people could do it, they would. Because people will do whatever they can to win, to get power.
Well,
that's just
the way things go. Let me ask about in this way then, because another thing that the AP was putting forward here was this idea that Republicans could possibly spin this to their advantage, in the sense that it's primarily in this, again, this is AP's reporting, this is AP's opinion, so take it for what it's worth, but AP's opinion essentially says, if not outright claims, that it has primarily been the Democrat Party that's been able to, quote unquote, take advantage of a mail-in voting process. They even go on to say that they're quoting from Trump here, saying Trump's hard line appears to be driven by his personal suspicions and concerns about his own reelection prospects. Statewide mail-in voting, he says, Trump tweeted this earlier this week, quote, doesn't work out well for Republicans. Let me put that to the Real News audience real quick. Why? Why wouldn't that work out well for Republicans? Could we make it work out well for Republicans? And let me say this one more thing, Sean. Like, Sean and I, we have a very intimate knowledge now of what it means to do a mail-in process, of what it means to get the word out to go vote, of what it means to urge your fellow citizens in other states even to participate in the voting process. Can I say right now, buddy, that is an exceedingly difficult thing to get people to participate in. Voting in general, let alone a mail-in voting process, dude. It's just hard to get people to do it, to go apply for the mail-in.
It's hard to get people to say they're going to do it.
Dude,
it's just hard to get people to say, yeah, I think I'm going to go vote. But that doesn't necessarily mean they will. But we get hype about people saying they're going to go vote, you know.
Right? And let's be for real about this too, man. This is a Tennessee-centric show from time to time because we so happen to live in Tennessee here, man. Tennessee is one of the worst states in the nation. I'm pretty sure we're second or third worst in the nation for voter turnout. I think the only state that's beating us is Mississippi. We're one of the worst in the nation for voter turnout, right? So a very small part of me kind of wants to say, as a Tennessean, we don't have a lot of room to argue here. Now, those that do participate in the state of Tennessee participate harder than almost any other state that I've ever lived in. Now, that is the God's honest truth. The folks that know their politics here know it better than any other citizen that I've been a part of. And they will participate, and they will participate hard, and they will find those hills they are willing to die in, and they will fight for liberty, causes, for truth, and everything else. And they will hold their politicians accountable, bro. And the interesting thing that I find out of that, buddy, is that it only takes a small percentage of the population participating well to hold your politicians accountable, at least to some extent. Because we do it pretty well in this state, even with the minimal amount of us that turn out. But the amount of us that turn out also means that at some of these local elections, buddy, we're talking a few hundred. We're talking just double digits sometimes that make a difference. Dude, what did Mayor Glenn Jacobs win that election by? I think it was 20 something votes prior to the total being counted.
It was something I think like that. It was not a negligible amount.
Right after the total votes were counted, with provisional ballots and all this other stuff, I think it was 40 something, man. So here's the other question I want to pose to the Real News audience. And Sean, if you want to give an opinion, let me know. If Trump says that mail-in voting, quote, doesn't work out well for Republicans, if we're looking at a situation where, say, by November, maybe there's some introduction or we have to consider that as an option, why wouldn't it work well for Republicans? Could we make it work well for Republicans? Because again, by and large, dude, like they seem to get out and vote. And if they can handle that type of process of mail-in, maybe we could spin this to our advantage. Go ahead.
No, that's a really interesting prospect, Mr. Henry, that you just threw out there. I did not think when Donald Trump said that what he meant was, I was not thinking what he meant was institutionally as a party, we're not good at getting people to do mail-in stuff. I thought of it as fraud. But maybe he did mean that. You really think he meant that from that perspective?
I don't know.
That's very interesting. I didn't think of it that way, even though you're probably right that it's true. I mean, that's what's interesting about the thought, Mr. Henry, is that it's probably true. Now, a great question. Could the Republican Party or people who are right-leaning, people who are more individualistic, do a better job at collectivizing and maybe not collectivizing, that's not the right word, using freedom of association to amplify their voice? Could they be better at that? Yes, they definitely could. I mean, there's an underlying personality trait that most people who lean right have that has to do with being more individualistic, not being kind of self-sufficient, but that hurts you in a political process in a republic because you need to get together with other people of like-minded affiliation or even like-minded negative affiliation where like you all don't like something. You need to do that in a country of 360 something million people in order to let your voice be heard by the rest of those people. You need to get together with other people. Could we do a better job? Yeah, we could. Absolutely. But I think a lot of the reason he was saying that was because of fraud. I think there's more worry about fraud in the age of, right now, already right now, in the age of digital, in the age of whatever. There's a lot of people. I've believed most of my adult life that at some point we'd return to paper ballots and hand counting. I really do. I thought that we would go through a digital thing. There would be scandals, and we'd pull back. And because why wouldn't we be able to do that? Why wouldn't we be able to count a bunch of hand ballots? We did it for hundreds, or not hundreds, but almost a couple hundred years. We did it. Surely we could do it again.
And we'll say, man, I do think there's a way to play off this idea of, look, coronavirus is clearly not party specific. It's not demographic specific. It's not age specific. It's not race specific. None of it matters. It's obviously, it doesn't matter what that comes down to. And there's a way to play off the idea of this virus is clearly going to affect everyone. So the components behind that virus, whether it be fear or motivation or whatever it might be, the components I mean being how you react to that virus being a part of our society now, that is going to be a motivating factor for both parties, I would think. I go to a comment from Michaela actually in the Real News chat section saying, I hate to tell y'all, I'm not going to go vote if I'm going to get sick. And I'm one of those people who live by politics. And that's the truth. If you know anything about Michaela around Knoxville, is Michaela around now, right? Yeah. Anyways, but she obviously someone that's been intimately involved with politics as long as I've known her. She's helped the campaign. She's did a blog post about all this stuff. To say that the girl knows politics and votes would be an absolute understatement. And if she's saying, I'm not going to risk it, she's got a family to look after for. She's got a kid to look after, right? I mean, she's not going to risk it and bring that else to go do this voting process. If, however, someone could play into that idea of like, I got it, I understand you have other priorities you have to look out, that right now you are possibly, maybe even reasonably prioritizing above what's going on with the ability to vote, right? If you're prioritizing the things above, maybe the way the Republican Party could play into that. And I'm only saying that, buddy, because I'm starting to see these tides shift just a little bit. I'm starting to see some of the states that we mentioned before, like your Iowas, like Florida a little bit, like Ohio, like West Virginia. I'm starting to see some of these shift a little bit to get their head around the idea of it's looking more and more likely that a November process is going to be led by mail-in. And if the case, all I'm saying, Shine, is that I think Republicans need a contingency plan for, if that's the case, how do we capitalize on that well above ahead of time and get our people mobilized to be able to get out there? Here's a quote that I wanted to get to, man, of saying, again, the AP reporting saying Trump himself requested a mail ballot for Florida's GOP last month. Still, this week, he said, quote, mail-in voting is horrible. It's corrupt. And the Republican National Committee moved to help state parties block expansion of the franchise. Already, dude, I'm cringing with how much is wrong about this reporting so far. Nevertheless, I'll continue. Goes on by saying the effort was most notable in Wisconsin, where voters were forced to wait in long lines after the GOP majority of the state Supreme Court prevented the Democratic governor's last-ditch attempts to delay the election. Dude, I'm telling you, there is so much wrong with that single paragraph. I don't even know where to start with it, buddy. And it's going to prove a little bit of what I'm saying. If this does have a slight bias towards anything in the AP right now, it's clearly a bias towards Democrats trying to pitch how good a mail-in voting process would be. If that's the game that's being played now, if that's the strategy, Republicans need to recognize that strategy and start to try and counter, or at least have something as good of a version of it, bro.
Well, don't you think they're kind of hedging right now?
I think so.
Yeah, I mean, don't you feel like if you know that mail-in ballot, I mean, just let me throw this out there, and I hate giving people credit like they're geniuses or something, but this isn't that genius. If you were the kind of person that believed that mail-in ballots were the idea of doing that nationwide for the presidency of the United States was a inherently bad idea, but you also knew that it was extremely possible that might be the only way to do it, given the worst case scenario, what would you be doing right now? Something that you do not want to happen is a very decent possibility of happening. I think what you'd be doing is talking about how it shouldn't happen. So when it gets to the point where it has to happen, there's a lot more space. You've created the argumentative room, the debate space for highly regulating it in certain ways.
Right.
Because you're like, hey, we've been saying this whole time we don't even want it. So in order to have it, if we are going to do it, we're going to need to do X, Y, and Z in order to make that legit. And I think that's probably what the Republican Party nationally is doing. Now, on the state side, as far as what the states are doing, it probably is just the bias against mail-in voting. Because, I mean, I have a bias. I mean, I'll admit it. I'm biased against mail-in voting. I think it's inherently bad. I think it's way too easy to manipulate. Just knowing the kinds of organizations that can do stuff with mailers and how efficient they can be. Just knowing that makes me nervous about mail-in voting because, I mean, you could have a commercial company swing very easily, just like you could, I guess, with digital voting or online voting. I mean, it's the same kind of problem, except it's almost worse because I hate to say it, like there's no digital paper trail. I mean, people could just like print their own ballots and fill them out and put people's names on them. I mean, everybody's info's out there, Grant. You can get a bunch of social security numbers. You can get a bunch of voter numbers and things like that.
And dude, and I totally hear what you're saying, man. Again, Real News Comments, man, just killing it this morning. I'm telling you, that's one of the best audience in the nation, man. I'm telling you right now. But
hit those comments.
John in Facebook is saying, John in Facebook here is saying absentee ballots have been screened and not properly counted. Plus, consider the time to count 100% absentee ballots versus in-person ballots, and some absentee ballots are as normally occur. Dude, take what John just said and apply that to every single year for the last however many years in the state of Florida alone. Apply what John just said every single year to a few counties, a few districts in Florida alone. Now extrapolate that to 50 states across the country. You get what I'm saying? I think that's a little bit of at right here is like, hold on, dude, hold on. We have a problem with the normal process as it is stalling. Dude, just this last midterms, did we not have a conversation about how Florida had continuously stalled for what? Weeks, and weeks turned into an odd sense of months. And then not even Florida, Georgia. We had a person in this situation where too, man, what's the lady's name who just I don't think ever really conceded, frankly, right? Like the state of politics is already
in Georgia. You're talking about man, what is her name?
Yeah, what is her name, right? Stacey Abrams, right?
Stacey Abrams. I kept wanting to say Cynthia McKinney.
It's like I'm not sure if she ever actually genuinely conceded. And I got one more time to this just
no, she never did. By the way, she created a PAC and with all that money that was donated to her from Hollywood and used it to endorse Bloomberg a month ago.
When the AP is reporting on something like the Republican National Committee moved to help state parties block expansion of the franchise, dude, what? First of all, wrong.
Because that was in the Supreme Court decision, right?
No, that's what I'm saying.
Like that, it was in there. Where is the source for that particular quote? Because in the Supreme Court, I'm being facetious, by the way. This did not happen, but the idea in that article is that the Supreme Court said, "We therefore henceforth decree that we will make the franchise smaller than it was before by not allowing voting." Mail-in voting,
right, dude? And that's where they go on to say the effort was most notable in Wisconsin. That's what Shine's talking about, and it goes on to say the effort was most notable in Wisconsin, where voters were forced to wait in long lines after the GOP majority in the state Supreme Court prevented the Democratic governor's last-ditch attempt to delay the election. Shine, let me break this down for a second. There is no, if you hear me right now, Real News. There is no such thing as a GOP majority legislating from the bench at a state Supreme Court level or even at the national Supreme Court level. Exactly. What do you mean, Mr. Henry? There's clear political bias in the court. Oh, is there? Because the GOP bias in any particular court is that there should be no legislating from the bench. There should be no judicial overreach of anything that is not within the clear parameters of what the judicial branch should do. And as an originalist, or at least at a minimum, a textualist, which are two different things, at a minimum, that used to be everybody. Every judge and every justice in the nation used to be that. What is that, Mr. Henry? You look at the four corners of the document and you say, well, based upon this and what the other court decisions say, and at the time of the writing of this particular document, we think it means this within the context. Okay. Now, if you're going to change the law, or if you're going to change how the law applies to something else, go over to that branch over there. It's that person's job, the legislature. You can't use my branch to circumvent this other major part of the government. That is the GOP strategy. That is the GOP ideology of how a court should be run. So hear me when I say this. When I say there is no such thing as a GOP legislating from the branch, it doesn't matter whether you have a Republican ideology, a Democrat ideology, whether you're a Green Party or Libertarian. If you don't think the court should be deciding legislation for you, it doesn't matter what your worldview is, because you're not going to hear it anyways. It matters what the legislature's worldview is. So when the AP comes out and shine and says something like the GOP majority was forced because of the GOP majority, there is no such thing as a GOP majority. The Republican version of that is to not let you know ever what their political bias is. The only political bias that should ever come through is your state's legislature's bias. That's my frustration, buddy.
Yeah,
with
because
the
they
way
make
the AP is
law.
pitching this, man.
Because they make the laws.
Exactly.
And if the people who made the laws have a bias, it will be reflected in that law. But the court's job is to just tell you what the law says.
And when the AP
but it's
comes
very
out
interesting. They must have a very powerful judiciary in that state, Mr. Henry, that a governor during a time of emergency can't control elections. You get what I'm saying there? Like, I would have, if very possible, if I was a governor and I really thought that it needed to happen, I might have told the state Supreme Court to shove it and said, this is a time of emergency. Regular laws don't apply. You know what I'm saying? If they used it based on this code, this code annotated, you cannot do mail-in ballots, blah, 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 blah. I might have just, I'm just being honest, and I'm surprised this didn't happen. Maybe it's because there's an overwhelming majority of the opposite party in his legislature where he could maybe be, impeached or something like that. But I'm surprised he didn't just say shove it, because it's very interesting in a time. I guarantee you there are states that if they want mail-in ballots, they'll have them. Like California, Florida, New York, Illinois. If they want mail-in ballots, they will have them. So something we need to talk about, because you've been basically talking about the merits kind of mail-in versus not mail-in. What does this mean? Kind of like, I almost feel like you're preparing people for it. Like, you're like, because this is something we do on Real News. We let you know about something way before it's a national debate so that you're ready for it. We're not necessarily telling you what to think or how to think, but we're trying to get you to think, because this is going to be a debate and you should be a part of it.
Exactly.
You should be a part of it. You should not let people dictate to you how your government is run, especially in these times, because these are time precedent times. These are precedent times. Whatever is done now will be seen as more acceptable in the future, even though it's a time of emergency. And that's important to remember. But I think a conversation we need to shift to, Mr. Henry, is what is the most important. Here's a fun philosophical political question. What is the most important thing for the November election? Is it to have the most accurate count? Or is the most important thing for people to be confident in the count?
Ooh, interesting.
Because, something that mail-in ballots really throws a big wrench into is confidence.
Yeah.
And I think the most important part of an election is people believing the outcome. And that is something we've had a problem with for 20 years. We've had a problem with this since Gore, Bush. And it has come up every election, both sides, with a fever pitch last election where we blamed another government for it. We had a party that still blames a country with the GDP the size of Italy, Russia, of throwing our election. So, and I've seen it just get progressively worse since 2000 with Gore Bush. So my question is it more important, and I want to hear in the chat room, is it more important that we get an accurate count or more important that people believe the count? And I know those two things sound like they're not exclusive, but they may end up being exclusive by the time this is all over. And because I think it's dangerous, more dangerous than a bad count is a substantial portions of America, the people of the United States, voters, believing that the count is not legit. That is the most dangerous, in my opinion. That's the most dangerous thing. Right. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, Mr. Henry.
Well, because I think what you're saying, man, is like one of the things that America has always done well, and it's going to sound like a strange thing when I say that we've done something well. Our constitutional republic, by the way, the longest lasting one in world history. Okay, constitutional republic, longest lasting one in world history. It actually is done. It was done so well that almost every other developed nation in the world right now followed our example of this idea of a constitutional republic. And if you don't believe that, look it up. Follow yourself. Again, Scalia likes to focus on this, that our Bill of Rights is not necessarily what's so great about America. Other countries have far better Bill of Rights than we do, like very clearly enumerated things that the government cannot do and protections of powers, whatever. It's the structure of our government and the structure of that Constitution that makes this country so great. And I think a little bit of what China's talking about is if you lose faith in that structure, if you lose faith in the underlying thing, that the precept that forms all of this, the great franchise, they call it, the right to vote, in a representative republic, they call it, or a constitutional republic. You elect your representative to go speak on your behalf because you just can't do it, right? To go speak on your behalf. If you lose faith in that entire process, the whole constitutional republic itself starts to shatter. And what he's drawing attention to is like, well, Mr. Henry and Shine, what are you talking about? Don't accurate numbers necessarily imply that people have faith? No, dude, because we just started. Look at the way we book in this, Shine. We just started this program by saying that there is no such thing as accuracy in numbers anymore, or at least not the way that people believe it. Okay. That's a bit of the problem with this day and age of what is even empiricism anymore. What is the truth of the matter asserted?
Absolutely.
If I can find some objective data and present it to somebody else, it doesn't necessarily even matter anymore because somebody else can have another source of objective data. We just started this program by saying what numbers of COVID-19 or coronavirus related deaths are even accurate, buddy.
Right.
That was literally how we started this program. So to draw another analogy here of if people are losing faith in this system of accurately reporting deaths, they could certainly lose faith in this system of accurately reporting numbers of an election. And let's say they are accurate. All it would take was a little narrative spin to push it out there and say, like, well, I don't know, man, they were all done by, mail-in voting, and now all of a sudden we have a major problem. And then going forward, what does the country look like? It's the same thing that we just had for the last 4 years. That's what Shine's talking about.
Or
the
worse.
Same thing we had for the last 4 years.
Most likely
was
worse.
Well, right.
I mean, they already started. They already started with Biden. They started with Biden last year and successfully impeached the president in the House. Before the election even happened. Before the election even happened, they did it. And then add in a factor of Bernie Sanders supporters who are going to do things that people are going to attribute to other countries, like not vote for the party that they are voted for in the primary. You get what I'm saying? Like, what if you had a bunch of people voting in the general? What if what everyone says is going to happen actually happens and Joe Biden gets absolutely swamped, in an electoral victory where he maybe gets 60 or 70 or 120 or 150 electoral votes and Donald Trump gets like 600 or something. There are people who are not as much. It's a confluence of factors that don't have all to do with Donald Trump or to do with Joe Biden, and in some cases have to do with the situation we're in, just the situation we're in. It's just situationally that they think this is gonna be a Dukakis style loss for Joe Biden. If that happens, don't you think that it'll just be worse than last year with impeachment? They'll say, "Oh, obviously there was cheating. There's no way Donald Trump won by that much." And you have these Bernie Sanders supporters who have introduced the idea into the consciousness that if you don't get elections that you like, you riot. A very un-American idea, a very European idea, a very French idea, by the way. Very French. And I don't like it. But you have people who, when Bernie Sanders dropped out this week, were saying, Bernie or bust. But then you had others saying Bernie or else. And, a lot of those people, I don't know, maybe like 15, 20% of Bernie Sanders supporters I really believe it's that high, by the way, fall into that camp of, Bernie Sanders is a little conservative for me, but we'll take him on the road to communism, And there's people who believe that, I don't know. I think that it's been introduced into our consciousness that political violence is okay, which is terrible. It's been introduced over the past few years that using force to affect opinions, that via cancel culture, using a kind of shame or actual force like Antifa in order to affect political opinions has been accepted. So I really worry about people not having confidence, even a few people, because that virus can spread like wildfire, and then you can have a very, very untenable situation because you don't want to have the current party or government in power having to basically prove that it has the power.
Dude, and
you don't want that.
What's shown on the screen right now, Shine, is yet another wrinkle to exactly what you're talking about. It's not just Republicans that would have a situation of talking about a potential mail-in ballot where maybe there's trust issues behind that. Maybe it's ripe for fraud, as President Trump says, or not. It's not just Republicans, dude. It's the entire country. All of us, Every single one of us. And what I mean is like Bernie, let's run this down, okay? Libertarians feel like they're a disenfranchised party because nobody takes them seriously. They got a problem with something going on right now. Green Party, I don't even know who the representative is. They got a problem with what's going on right now. Bernie Sanders supporters have been played out for the last 8 years in a row. And by that, what I mean is they've had some weird sort of backdoor dealings. You don't have to take my word for this. Go read the articles yourself. Go read the judge's opinion for yourself. That Bernie Sanders has kind of won primaries and not really been given primary wins before. He's kind of just outright won full-on nationwide elections and not getting given the nomination for it before. Okay. Now, I'm not saying that's what happened with Biden. It clearly happened with Hillary, and people feel like it was Bernie's next time. They already feel disenfranchised. Look at the headline that I'm throwing up here right now. Your baseline establishment Democrats are about to feel disenfranchised. Did we not just pull up a story from Alyssa Milano, who's now willfully and willingly overlooking Joe Biden's sexual assault allegations because she wants him to be the presidential nominee to beat Trump? Well, what if this happens, buddy? What if Democrats, it is true the poll now, what if they want Andrew Cuomo to come out here? What do you do with those people who have already sold everything out for Biden? And now you couple on top of that a mail-in process. Dude, it's not just, I think what Trump is talking about, this is one of the ways that I don't mean to insinuate or imply that he's doing a 3D chess thing. It's just his simplistic way of speaking carries so much more weight than I think even if I could go on an entire diatribe of something would. If he says 4 or 5 words, it sometimes lends more, conversation to it than if you actually try and explain it. I think this is a bit of what he means. I think a bit of what he means is like, yeah, it's ripe for fraud, but the country right now is ripe for a fire to set off. Okay, here's the first paragraph. Obviously, majority of Democrats want want to nominate New York Governor Andrew Cuomo for president instead of Joe Biden, according to these poll results shared exclusively with the New York Post. When did this come out? This came out literally this morning. Came out this morning. National poll found 56% of Democrats prefer Cuomo, with 44% wanting to stick with the presumptive nominee Biden, a 12-point margin well outside the 4.8% margin of the error of the Democrat sample. So, Shine, this lends perfectly to what you've been saying too. It's this point we have to start asking the question of what, not just the accuracy of the numbers. That's one thing. I think a bigger component behind that is exactly what Trump said. And part of the reason why he wanted to pick this week in particular, to get people back into the economy, the story, the narrative, okay? These sort of archetypal lines that people are almost genetically drawn to. It's like in our DNA. It's weird. Those types of things, that's what moves and shapes us. That's what people get into. Okay. Mm-hmm. The believability behind an election result is sometimes to some people more important than the accuracy of the numbers. Now, I know my empiricist, I know my brother, for example, out there, Shine, if he's hearing this, if he's listening an hour later on, he's probably losing his mind. What are you talking about? I can just show people the charts. Can you, man? Can you? Because in a day and age where truth is relative, does it matter what your charts show? That's been my whole problem all along, Sean. That's why I love the idea of objectivity, because if all truth is relative, that one sentence itself cannot be true, right? You got to say that at least the one sentence itself, that all truth is relative, that's a truthful statement. Otherwise, your whole premise destroys itself. And that's the world we're in right now, buddy. The world we're in is exactly what Shine's talking about. Is belief in the narrative is possibly more important than the actual data,
than the validity of
the
narrative.
The show out here.
You know what I'm saying? Right? Than the validity of the narrative. It's more, well, the way and I didn't know this till recently, and I may be wrong, but it's a premise that I'm operating under, is humans think narratively. When they think scientifically, they are doing something that humans don't normally do, and they do not do by default. Our default programming is narrative structure, not fact structure. Facts are dependent on the narrative, not the other way around, in our brains. You know what I'm saying? Like, this object has a different context based on the story I'm telling. It can either be a phone, a weapon, a projectile. You know what I'm saying? Based on the story, that makes it dependent on what this is, this cell phone. And I could have picked up anything. A cup. A cup is a cup when I'm drinking out of it. It's a weapon when I'm hitting people with it. You get what I'm saying? Or a hat when I'm wearing it. But that all depends on the story I'm telling, right? Not the object. Objectivity. Objectively, it is a cup, but there's something beyond that objectivity that has to do with narrative. And it has to do with how humans are using it. Use is really more real. How you use things is more real than objectivity. And I think that I pull all that back to the narrative structure for elections, because I've been worried since 2016 and 17 what this election would be like. The fact that we have a worldwide pandemic only increases that worry. But I will say this to kind of like bring it back down to earth. You know, get out. I say all that to say, make sure you vote in November, as long as you feel safe to do so. Make sure you feel, as long as you feel safe to do so, make sure you do vote and participate in these elections, because here's a little reality. We'll just get right to the reality. Less people are going to vote. So that means your vote is going to proportionally count for more.
Yes. So
make sure you get out and vote, because a lot of people won't. So make sure you do it. And I also want to say happy Good Friday to everybody. Happy Easter to everybody. There may be, I don't know. I mean, we're still thinking about it. There may be some kind of Easter-themed programming on Sunday. May do like either a watch party of a service, or I don't know, something uplifting. But there'll definitely be some posts on Facebook to check out. Me and Mr. Henry are just keep getting new toys to play with. We're playing with these new microphones.
That's right.
We didn't even tell each other. We both got the same microphone. It was the cutest thing. I got it in the mail yesterday, and he got his delivered to Target or something like that. And I called him like this on the meeting like this, and I'm like, check out this new microphone, bro. I'm not going to be stuck with my microphone off anymore, because and then I can turn it back on like that. I can just press it right here. But anyway, we have lots of new toys, so we're just using this kind of format because we know you're used to it, a daily morning show, because we used to do it. But we want to experiment with growing the YouTube channel, with doing some like policy specific or issue specific or story specific videos that are like 3 to 5 minutes. I would love to make some like documentary style stuff, Grant. It doesn't have to be super flashy. We could just voice over, write a script for a PowerPoint presentation, and do a little.
And we could use music and all kinds of cool stuff.
Yeah, man. And we've got all kind of cool stuff coming, and all kind of cool content coming as well. And obviously everyone knows that this program here is not affiliated with any version of the company that Sean and I work for, but you can see in Sean's background there of Americans for Prosperity.
I'm just a big fan. I'm just a big fan.
Massive fan, and
that's why I got
100% believe in everything that they're doing. Very, very strong libertarian causes for everything they're doing behind this stuff. And this is me speaking. It's not a company line that anything like that at all. But all that just to say that there's some other stuff that's going to be coming up, programming on this channel as well, that will be issue specific, policy specific. We have interviews already lined up that we'll be getting some of these rolled out next week with Representative Jason Zachary. That's coming. Representative Justin Lafferty. That's coming. A few of the representatives in the East C area. I'll tell you one other thing we may want to do here, Shine, too, is like some of these open seats, like Dunn's open seat and some other open seats in that area as well, man. Martin Daniels open seats. We may want to get some of these candidates on here just to get the message out to their people. And we also, in the Middle Tennessee area, if you're watching the Middle Tennessee area, we have some great interviews coming up with the guy. I'm pretty sure his name is Steve Glover, city councilman here in the Nashville area, talking about. I hesitate to give out these numbers because none of them have been confirmed, but just believe me when I say the property tax increase that's being suggested right now in the Nashville area to pay for the tornado situation that's happening, these unemployment claims, and a number of other things. That the property tax increase that's being suggested in Nashville is something that I don't think anybody would actually genuinely consider. Well, no, let me put it this way. If I were to say the number, I wouldn't want to say it because it would be misreporting. But the numbers I've heard, if I were to put it out there right now, nobody would believe me. I'll put it that way. Okay. Nobody would believe me in the Real News audience about how much of an increase they're talking about doing. We got interviews about that coming up. And part of the fear, I think, is if the Nashville area is setting a precedent for some of these property tax increases, then it's far more comfortable to say Memphis to do it. And it gets far more comfortable to say, let Knoxville do it. And I will say this for sure. The guy running it up here in Nashville is far more fiscally conservative. I may go out on a limb here. Tell me if I'm wrong. I'll recant later if I am. The guy running it up here in Nashville is far more fiscally conservative than I would say Kincannon is out there in Knoxville. Okay. Now that I think is a pretty definitively clear statement based upon the stuff that I have studied. So if he's considering doing something like this, it's a pretty easy peg to knock and say that Kincannon might also be considering it down the road. Who knows, man? I doubt our county folks are going to play ball with that as well. But all that, we got this stuff coming up. China will get the music rolling. Let me know when you get that rolling here. We're on our way for the out.
Like he just said, we might do some stuff over the weekend, maybe stream some Jordan Peterson stuff. Who knows? We may get squirrely and do something tomorrow. Just pay attention to your little top line there. Like, love, hit the hearts, all that stuff. We really appreciate y'all when you share this stream. Really helps us grow it. Check out the YouTube, and whatever you got to do to turn on those bell notifications. You can see it up there in the top right hand corner of this live video you're watching it right now. That little bell icon. Live video notifications. If you click all or highlights or whatever else, it'll actually notify you on your Facebook live stream when we're going live. So the second we do, you can get the niceness that is our ugly mugs delivering the information to you. Shine, I'll kick it to you to sign us off, buddy.
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone, for listening today. This has been Real News. By the way, real fans of Real News, like and share. Smash the like button. Smash like. Do it. But like and share. Thank you so much for listening. We'll be back probably Tuesday. We've been having trouble with Mondays with our schedule, but we'll try to do Monday, but definitely Tuesday at 10 a.m. This has been Real News. I'm your host, David Shine Thompson. For Mr. Henry, this is Real News, and we'll see you next week.